Thank you everybody for joining. I see people are still coming in. We will begin very promptly. All right, so please allow me to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We've got a great presentation today by a very amazing person. And the title, as you can see from the screen, is The 6 C's of Effective Storytelling for Corporate Leaders. I think that this will be amazing for everybody. This webinar is sponsored by the Pacific Tango Group. So please allow me to give a brief introduction of PTG. So Pacific Tango Group is focused on helping Asia Pacific originated companies succeed in the US. We engage with clients prior to entering the American market to help them plan and prepare for a successful launch. We also work with clients after arriving in America to help them establish their physical, legal, and business presence. Finally, we work with established subsidiaries of Asian companies to help them stay abreast of local market and business changes. Pacific Tango Group is a consortium of highly skilled international business professionals, each representing a functional service area such as sales, digital marketing, technology implementation, strategy, operations, human resources, and distribution, just to name a few. Clients engage with Pacific Tango Group in a variety of ways. There are short-term tasks or projects. So these may be limited scope projects that the client doesn't have the internal resources to complete themselves, or which have a limited time basis. So some examples include translation, documentation, and business process review. There's also midterm initiatives, such as advertising campaigns, corporate or product branding, creation of accounting systems, sales and business development. These are just some of the activities that fall into this category. Also, there's long-term sustained outsourcing. So accounting, HR, sales, and business development fall into this category. If you have any questions, if you'd like to learn more about the Pacific Tango Group, please reach out and go to pacifictangogroup.com and learn more there. So next, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today. So Ms. Natsuyo Lipschultz, she is a Japanese native, but a New Yorker by heart. She's an international speaker on global leadership and communication and a former McKinsey strategy consultant. Her global public speaking books are published in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, and she has also co-authored the Amazon bestseller book, The Success Blueprint, in English with Brian Tracy. Not only that, there's more. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a 5-time Toastmasters speech contest champion. She's a breast cancer survivor, as well as a national finalist in a ballroom Latin dance competition. And probably most importantly, she's the mother of a 9-year-old daughter who's a professional model and figure skater. I was wondering if there's anything that we may have missed, but there's actually a weakness that she has, and it's cake. So I can definitely agree with that. So without further ado, thank you everyone again for joining us, and let's hear it from Ms. Natsuyo.
Thank you so much, Tasha. Well, welcome everyone. So today's theme is story. Stories have power. Stories open up listeners' hearts and connect our hearts. And stories help your message not only heard, but acted upon. But just way too many business leaders don't quite use stories enough in their presentations. And you may be one of them. And you may be thinking, my life or my business is quite ordinary. I don't have any story worthy of telling. Well, you don't have to be a Hollywood star to play a role in a play, in a story. A simple and ordinary story, well told, will save you and your business, just like it did for me. Now, let me take you back to 2005. Soon after I started my own strategy consulting firm in New York, I was hired by, let's call him Mr. K, a 65 years old retired government official who's now the chairman of this 4-century-old Japanese craft company. And this company used to make samurai swords. And Mr. K had his marketing plan all laid out, but he wanted to make sure that his strategy is going to work in the US. So he turns to me and says, 信本さん、あなたにお願いすることにしたからね、しっかり頼んだよ。That means you're hired. I thought, I've been in the States for 10 years already. I've got my experience. I've got my MBA. Now, with this golden client, I've got it all. So I checked Mr. K's very detailed plan. My reaction? His plan is going to take forever. We need a shortcut to get into the market quickly. Forget his plan. I know the market. And then I quickly typed an email explaining why his plan is not going to work and why mine will. Very logical. No room for argument. I was so certain that Mr. K would thank me. Next day, I got the shortest email from Mr. K. Just 2 words. Call me. I said 2 words to myself. Oh, shoot. And I called him right away. And he gave me another 2 words. Come today. Now, if you came with me later that day, you would have found Mr. K sitting behind his antique desk. On the wall hangs this beautiful shining samurai sword above his shining bald head. It was a masterpiece. I mean, the sword. His voice cuts through the air. Who do you think you are? I said, I'm your consultant. You hired me. Who do you think you are? In my head. Then he rises and grabs the sword. Oh, shoot. And he hands me the sword. Am I supposed to fight him? But instead, Mr. K told me a story. 400 years ago, when our company was founded, there were only 3 other samurai sword makers in the area. To catch up with high demand from wear and tear, these companies learned to mass produce samurai swords. And they made these samurai swords available to the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the north to the south. But our founder, Yushichi, insisted on the most traditional, most painstaking way of making swords. And he didn't make it for everyone. Now, a real samurai sword takes 3 to 4 weeks to make. Imagine your company can only make 1 product in 1 month. And he continued, a masterpiece is not made in haste. It's fired, it's hammered, it's carefully folded, layer after layer. Repeat. We've been using this same technique for 400 years. And now we're the only company that still stands. To make a masterpiece, you must master the pieces. No shortcut. When I heard that story, I understood. I understood their values, history, pride, and I understood how I was ignoring all that. His story forever changed my perspectives in how I develop strategies for my clients. I need to understand their emotional values, and shortcut doesn't take me there. I have to master the pieces. That day, he gave me this, a business card holder his company produced with the same attention they've been giving to their samurai swords. And even after 16 years, I still use it. This is a reminder to myself of Mr. K's story. Now, what about you? As a business owner or leader, are you telling your story enough? Does your story stay in people's minds even after 16 years? Does your story change the way your customers, your employees, your stakeholders think about your brand? Well, if your answer is no, don't worry. After today, you will be a storyteller, just like Mr. K. Through your story, you will be able to get your message not only heard, but acted upon. Now let's think about how to persuade people. The great philosopher Aristotle said, there are three elements you absolutely need to fully persuade people: logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos is a logical appeal. Your message has to be logically sound so that the other person, your listener, will understand perfectly. And pathos is an emotional value. You need to be able to connect with a listener at the emotional level. And finally, ethos. It's an ethical value or trust. When people trust you as a speaker, it's most likely that they're going to listen to you. And Aristotle said, if you're missing even one of these three elements, you won't be able to persuade people completely. So how do we incorporate these three elements into your presentation? And before I'm going to go through that, I would like all of us to watch this video by Mike. And I say that Mike is not here yet, but Mike is one of our PTG members. And he gave a presentation about what he does. And after my coaching, he completely transformed his presentation. And you're going to watch the after video too. But first, let's watch the before video and see how he did. And as you're watching this video, please write down in the chat what messages you're getting out of his presentation. What do you think is his important key message? So as you're listening, write that down. So here is the video.
My background is industrial design. And through the years, I've been an industrial designer for 30 years. And through the years, I've become quite a multidisciplinary chap, really dealing with branding, graphic design, UX design, service design, and marketing. So I wear a lot of hats as an industrial designer. I'm currently director of design for Kenmore Appliances. I deal a lot with innovation. I work with the engineering team on trying to develop innovation for the brand. A lot of times when we have a vendor, we usually end up doing a co-creation piece where we generate some intellectual property out of that. OnTest is a engineering test equipment manufacturer, and they are proposing a kind of a joint venture with a Chinese company that makes similar products. But what their problem was, they wanted to make sure that they branded the new product coming in from China in accordance with the OnTest brand mark. What you see right here is the OnTest brand mark, and it is very elegant, very engineering oriented, I would argue. So every designer should sort of go through the process of creating a brief. What I'm saying here is OnTest Desired private label alternative OEM test equipment offers many design opportunities to strengthen the OnTest brand. The mission, to use color, finish, and material to positively affect the buyer in order to communicate and convey a more visually interesting, fresh, and approachable product that can truly enhance the laboratory environment and evoke positive emotion amongst those that will work with the equipment. The following images are an exploration of this idea in varying levels of magnitude. We hope you will be inspired. So design is very much about inspiring. And design is very much about saying, you know, leapfrogging the typical approach and going to something that's much more evocative and transcendent. And so that's what design aims to be. So this was what I call a step, basically translation. I go through a step, stretch, and leap. And using a step, stretch, and leap mentality means that it is what it means. It's an incremental and then a slightly pushed solution, and then the leap version is something that is like really kind of out there, really kind of trying to be the most advanced yet acceptable design language that a company might use to position themselves in a very, very evocative way that gets attention, that gets eyes on the product, that says to people, wow, they're bold, and that has meaning. So as a brand advocate, I'm always trying to talk about how products and services come back and shine a light on the corporate organization in terms of their core values and beliefs. This is extremely important. What you produce as a company, in terms of your collateral material, in terms of your product, in terms of how you work, that's all part of your brand.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the video right here. So Kevin, you're very active. So you said attention to branding, design should be inspiring. Yeah, it was about his design philosophy, right? And the quality of the product reflects the company. Yeah, and what else? What other messages did you get? 30 years experience, lots of design experience, innovation is important. So a lot of key messages, a lot of important points about how he approaches design. And he went through his design process, and also he introduced a case study. He showed his work, and he had a few different messages, I see. And it seems like he covered everything. Am I hearing some music? I guess it's coming from the New York street. Never mind that. So he seems to have covered a lot of topics, right? As you can see in the comments, people you guys took away a lot of different points. But that's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of speakers can make. When we start to understand more and more about our topic, inevitably that more gets in our way and it finds its way into our speech or presentation. But what's really important to understand is less is more. And especially if you're talking to a global audience, they may need more time to digest your messages. So less is more. And just because you know more doesn't mean that you have to show more in that particular speech or presentation. So the way you want to think about it is, what is one thing you really want them to understand and remember very well? And that one message needs to be logically make sense for your audience, not just yourself. And that's what I call you-focused logic, not I-focused logic. So the most important rule in public speaking is to have a clear, you-focused, one big message. No matter what kind of speech or presentation you're giving, there's always one important point that you want your audience to take away. And that's one big message. And you need to convey this one big message throughout your presentation. And in Mike's case, as we reviewed together, he had a lot of different messages, from his design philosophy to his case study to the project focus to his experience. So what is it that he really wanted to tell you, and he really wanted you to take away with? Now, some of you may be thinking, but there are always so many pieces of information I need to include. They're all important. Well, my response to that is yes and no. Because information is not made equal. They're not all equal. There is some information that's more of a big idea, and other information is more of a details, like examples and reasons and backgrounds. And this big idea is your one big message. And the details, reasons, backgrounds, examples are your supporting points, and I call them main points. And all the main points have to support one big message. And you have to remember, one big message has to be you-focused, not I-focused. So it's very important, before you're coming up with your one big message, think about these 4 questions. First, who's the audience? And I'm not just talking about, well, my audience is salespeople, or my audience is women in their 30s in New York City. You need to dig deeper into their inner motivation. What are their challenges or frustrations, interests, voids, flaws, or problems? What are they thinking? What are they not thinking? What's their pain points? So dig deeper into their audience's mindset. And second, what's in it for them? What's the benefit they're going to receive if they listen to you? Why should they listen to you? And if they didn't receive your message, what's going to happen? So we're always thinking about what I want to tell them. But the presentation is not about you. It's actually about how much they can take away from your presentation. So it's about them. So what exactly is the benefit for them? And the third question is, why you? What qualifies you to speak on this topic? Why are you giving this presentation to them now? And when I was coaching Mike, he in the previous version of his presentation, he mentioned the step, stretch, leap approach was commonly used in the design field. And I said, wait a second, who wants to hear about some common method? They want to hear something unique, something special, something really specific about your approach, because he's giving a presentation to people who might become his customer. So his value has to shine through his presentation. And maybe this method, step, stretch, and leap method, may be available to other people too. But it was his strategic decision to choose that method so that he can maximize the effect. So own the method. You have to own the space. So why are you speaking to the audience? The fourth question is, how do you want them to think, feel, and act differently as a result? And every presentation has a purpose and goal. And maybe if you're a salesperson, you're thinking, well, every presentation is the same. I want them to buy my product. But think about it. Do people buy your product in the first meeting? Not really. Maybe in the first meeting, you want them to get to know you or get to know the company, the brand, the product, so that they get more interested and you will get the next appointment. But if it's the 5th meeting with them, then maybe you want them to sign a contract, make a decision, and buy the product right on the spot. So every time you give a presentation, even if the grand goal is the same, there is a different micro goal. So every time you give a presentation, think about this micro goal. What specific next step do I want them to take after this particular presentation? So with these 4 questions, you can have a you-focused mindset. So now you can develop your one and only one big message. What is the one message you want your audience to take away? and make sure that it's you focused. And also, if you can say it in more or less 10 words, it's more likely that people will remember. If it's more than 10 words, they're not going to remember. It's too long. And when you think you have your one big message, think again. Is there any other way to rephrase your message? Think as many times as possible so that your one big message is really catchy and memorable and simple enough so everyone, even a 10-year-old, can understand and recite. So now you have the one and only one big message. And some of my clients ask me, does my one big message have to be something completely new, a new idea that my audience has never heard of? Absolutely not. Because, I mean, how many of us can come up with a brand new idea that no one has ever heard of? Well, unless you're an Einstein, it's impossible, right? So your message itself could be similar to others. But what makes you and your one big message unique to yourself is your own perspective and your own personal story. So that's where pathos comes in. And no matter how logical your message is, logos alone will not invite them to take an action. You need pathos. And great leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, speakers, all have one thing in common. They're great storytellers. And they really understand in order to influence people and move them to action, you have to be able to tap into their emotion. And before you sell anything, you need your audience to connect with you. Because sometimes two people are selling the two exact same products, but you feel for one person, not the other. That's an emotional connection, right? So they really need to understand your why. And there's no better way to do that than telling a compelling story, because your story is your why. But you also don't want to randomly tell a story without a purpose. I mean, you probably heard of someone rambling on and on and on, and you go, stop it, right? So you need strategy and framework to effectively compose a story. And that's the 6 C's of effective storytelling. The 6 C's is based on the 3-act structure. And this maybe you've heard of this 3-act structure. It's often used in screenplay writing. And Act 1 is a setup. It's the normal before some incident happens. And it's used for exposition to establish the main characters, their relationships, and the world they live in right now. And Act 2 is confrontation. Some tough incident happens and confronts the main character. And the main character tries to resolve the conflict, but they find themselves in ever worsening situations. And they have to really learn the new skills or come to some revelation about themselves and their lives. And Act 3 is new normal. It's a resolution of the story and leaving the character with a new sense of who they really are. And if you think of any of your favorite movie, I'm pretty sure that it follows this 3-act structure. And business storytelling goes the same way. But there is one big difference: the next step. In films and other forms of entertainment like theaters, the main goal is to leave the audience with some feelings. But afterwards, they'll go back to their homes and they do their own things in their own ways. But in business, our main goal is to leave the audience with a motivation to take a specific action. It could be buy my product, or it could be approve the budget, or maybe simply make the next appointment. So before you choose your story, make sure you clarified the point you want to make through the story and specific next step you want them to take. With that in mind, choose the right story. And the 6 C's of effective storytelling will help you turn the ordinary situation into great stories and leave a lasting impression. So let's dive in. The first C is character. What do you remember most about a story? It's usually the people in it. And some situations become interesting because there is a relatable character in them. And every story has a main character, or they're called the hero or protagonist. And some stories have a bad guy, a villain or antagonist. And you might play the protagonist or antagonist, but make your story real, not fictional. Otherwise, it's not going to be relatable. And also bring your characters to life so that your audience can see and hear and feel them. And this will help build an emotional connection with your audience. And for example, that your characters they may have a distinctive appearances, including body language or tone of voice or mannerism or facial features. And if you haven't noticed already, I started my webinar with my story. And there was one huge character, right? Mr. K. And Mr. K had shining bald head. And when I acted him out, I slightly lowered my voice so that I can change from me as a narrator to Mr. K, the character. So when you bring the character to life, it's more relatable and they can see and hear and even feel the character. And most importantly, you need to highlight your character's inner motivation. What do they want? What do they not want? What are their goals and what's standing in their way? Then the character will come alive for your audience and they'll be emotionally hooked into the story right away. The second C is circumstance. When crafting a good story, there needs to be a narrative so that it gives the story some context. And circumstance is the before picture and what used to be normal for your characters. So vividly paint that picture. The third C is conflict. And conflict is the most important piece of the C's in a story because it makes your audience sit on the edge of their seats. And look into what I call the 4 F's, the failure, frustration, flaw, first. And also, when you show the conflict, don't show it in just one shot. You want to escalate the conflict little by little by little. And I call this the mall escalator method. With mall escalators, if you think about it, you go up one flight and walk around the floor, then go up another flight, walk around, right? So just like that, you're escalating the character's emotional escalation, plateau, emotional escalation, and plateau. And this way, you can create suspense. If you think about the movie Titanic, after the ship hits the iceberg, the conflict was escalated little by little by little, like this mall escalator, the mall escalator way, right? And if the ship sinks soon after she hit the iceberg, the story ends right there. Boring. And I call this the elevator method. It goes from 80th floor all the way down to the lobby. Boom, that's it, end of it. On the other hand, if the water penetrated the lower deck and the ship doesn't sink at all, the story never ends. Again, boring. And I call this a moving walkway method. Moving walkway, right? One of those in the airports. So it's forever flat. There's no excitement at all. So you want to remember that your audience are hardwired to pay attention to problems in a story. So consider the problems, challenges, fears, or weaknesses your audience face, and weave those into the story so that it's more relevant and personable for your audience. Now, the cure. Cure is the solution. And cure could be not only your products or services, but also someone, some person, or a thing, or an incident, or method, or it could be some book you read, the poem you saw, or some light in the sky you saw. But you, the speaker, cannot be the cure. Because when you make yourself a guru, you're no longer relatable. So never make yourself a guru or a cure. So what caused you to overcome the conflict you're facing? So that's your cure. And then change. In great stories, the protagonist is never the same at the end. They have a new normal. And they must change as a result of the conflict and cure. And at the end of the story, they may be kind or more resilient or wiser and stronger, and or they have a better product or efficient production. And your audience needs to understand the key piece of wisdom or advice that will allow them to overcome their obstacles and change. They can change for the better. And last but not least, carry out. What is the single most important piece of information or advice or concept that you want your audience to take away? And what action do you want them to take as a result of your story? Or what lessons can be learned? This takeaway or carry out should be simple enough to be remembered and easy enough for them to go away and implement. So that's why I often focus on just one simple next step. If you give them too many options, it's likely that they're not going to take any of the actions. So one simple next step. And this is a great place to focus on this next step so that they will be taking an action. So with this 6 C's in mind, let's watch Mike's after video. After coaching, he incorporated the 6 C's into his presentation and completely transformed his presentation. So let's watch it.
Great design inspires and causes you to say, wow. I'm sure you've all experienced this in your lives. You've seen a great product or some kind of design object, and it just grabbed you and made you say, wow, that's kind of cool. That is good design doing its job. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Saubert, and I'm the Chief Design Officer for the Pacific Tango Group. And our goal is to create outstanding visual brand language design for our clients that builds their core brand values. Meet Mr. Jin, CEO of Ontest Corporation, an engineering test equipment manufacturer based in South Korea. Mr. Jin's a tough cookie, really tenacious, tough decision maker, very conservative and tough to please. He's got a great logo, a recent achievement of his marketing team that reflects their kind of mindset on innovation and forward thinking. It's a great mark. Mr. Jin's mission to us was create a new product visual brand language that reflects the Ontest logo and helps differentiate him from the other brands that are out there. Mr. Jin's product looks visually not too compelling. In fact, you don't even see the Ontest logo on any of his products. It's just gray and beige. we decided to employ a method called the step, stretch, and leap method. It's extremely powerful in trying to find out what a key decision maker's real stance is on their brand position in terms of the visual expression of their product. The step version. Great design inspires and causes you to say,
Sorry about that. It went to
on their brand position in terms of
there it
the
is.
visual expression of their product. The step version. Really clean, adding color, provides the background for an on-test logo, and really creates a visually compelling look. Now this is just what it is, a step. It's a step version from where Mr. Jin's product is today. So in the solution finding process, we don't stop there. Mr. Jin liked this a lot, but we wanted to take him further. We went to the stretch solution, adding a third color, providing more contrast for the on-test logo to jump off of. He really liked this. But this was not yet the boundary that we thought he could go. We took him to the leap version, which really pushed the contrast on the gray, almost went to a white instead of a gray, light gray contrasting color. But you can see the on-test logo really pops off of that dark gray and creates an extremely compelling visual brand language. In the end, Mr. Jin selected the leap version of this brand design proposal for all the right reasons. First, he was a little indecisive, but we were able to convince him that this was the way to go because it represented what the on-test culture was all about. Being innovative and forward-thinking and having energy in your product, not being dull, boring, and beige. So, in closing, use all the tools you have: color, finish, material, brand, graphics, and you too can help create a wow situation for the next decision maker that you have to convince. Thank you for watching.
All right. So how about that? What have you noticed about his after video? What change have you seen? And most importantly, what can you identify some of the C's? Anyone? You can unmute yourself and speak up. If no one unmutes, I'm going to point to someone. Confidence. Yeah, confidence too. Because he had a structure, he was really confident that he can tell the story effectively, right? And your message was clear. Yes, it was you focused. What else? Yep, Danny he used Act 1, 2, 3. Can you elaborate? Can you identify some of the C's? Do you want to unmute yourself, Danny? Or not?
This is Kevin. I'm going to jump in. His character was pretty clear. He was a tough cookie.
Right. Yeah, he didn't just introduce Mr. Jin, but he described how he is. He's a tough cookie, very conservative, and difficult to please, right? So you can immediately imagine dealing with Mr. Jin, right? What else? What other C's did you identify?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I think as Kevin mentioned that he described the character describe the challenges that need to be partaken. It's not just a job, but I think they need to please the client, and then the changes that he made to that of the situation, and then also he described the later on the outcome of the
Right. Well, thank you for covering all 6. Yeah. So he included all the 6 C's, and so Mr. Jin's character came to life, and it was a clear circumstance. Before it was beige and gray and boring, so that's what they had, and also the conflict, right? He knew that he knew his job was to design a better equipment, but there was some business challenges, and Mr. Jin was kind of reluctant, and he was being very conservative, and there was a conflict there. But his method, the cure, was step, stretch, and leap method. That's his cure, and that's what opened up Mr. Jin to more opportunity and more challenges, and that's how he changed. And as a carryout, this method is what was powerful enough to lead the clients to be more brave, possibly, and also design can really shed a light on the corporate values and brand values. So yeah, and his carryout was clear and more concrete images and steps and clearer, crisper message. So when you incorporate 6 C's, you can really transform the presentation. It's more vivid. You can see and hear and feel the characters and the pain and the scenes, right? So here is a free gift for all of you. This is a free ebook, and it talks about the 6 C's of storytelling in more details. So if you have a phone, put your phone against the QR code, and you can get the link to download the 6 C's. So do that right now, and in 5 seconds, it's going to go away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So now we have a compelling story, and we have the right logic. The final final element in the triad is ethos. And again, Aristotle, the great philosopher Aristotle said, people are more likely to believe someone who can be trusted. And if the audience trusts you, then they expect that what you're telling them is true. So how do you build trust? And that's the ethos. An ethos can be built before your speech, after your speech, but most importantly, during your presentation. And that's how you deliver. So once you have a solid structure and compelling content, it's time to focus on delivering your message with maximum impact. Now, here's a study by Albert Mehrabian. He's a professor of psychology at UCLA, and his famous model is called 738-55 communication model. And it says only 7% of communication takes place through the words we use, and 38% tone of voice, 55% body language. So this means that our nonverbal messages far outweigh our verbal messages. But don't misunderstand. This does not mean that your verbal messages are not important. You still need to strategically choose your language to convey your message. And after you've done that, and when you're finally delivering your carefully thought out message, then nonverbal messages become very important. For example, let's say my verbal message is, your dress is nice, right? Or your dress looks nice on you. If I say it like, well, let me talk to Kasha. Well, let's say, Kasha, your dress looks really nice on you. you would believe me, right? You see Kasha smiling, right? She likes it. But what if I say it like this? Kasha, your dress looks nice on you. Look at her face. You don't believe me, and maybe she's offended, right? So it's how you deliver. Mean what you say, right? And we often say, "Thank you so much for coming." Do you really mean it? Are you just saying it because it's a protocol? Have a weight in your word you say. So as business leaders, it's really important that we understand what we are communicating verbally and non-verbally. So pay attention to your non-verbals so you can develop trust between you and your audience. So today we learned the 3 key elements to persuade people and how to incorporate these 3 elements into your speech and how to build your story with a clear message so your message is not only heard, but acted upon. But just one more step before you go out there and share your idea with the world. Put your knowledge into practice. Try putting together your presentation and rehearse. And if you need help, I'm here to help. And you can reach me at this website or any of these social networks. And I have private coaching, webinars, and e-learning programs or corporate trainings. So if you need help, I'm available at your service. Thank you so much.
I have a question on your body language. There's studies done. So
Yes.
if you're in a room with 5 people and you ask them about the person they're talking with body language, all 5 will come up with a different version. So.
I'm sorry, what, can you repeat that again? All 5 people?
So if you say you're in a meeting with 5 people, and then after the meeting you went and interviewed the 5 people and asked them about my body language when I was talking to the 5. Not one of them would have the same interpretation. They'd have 5 different interpretations. That was a study there's been studies done about that. So I was just curious.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that study. So it's about 5 people observing you.
I just use 5 people.
Okay.
I help people in job search, and I've gone the talks on it. And the person said when you're interviewing, and sometimes you have a group interview, at the end,
right?
They all will. And it was a big study done in college, a college professor, that they had the 5 people would have a different interpretation of your body language. So not one of them would have the same interpretation.
I wonder if it's a culture-related study, because depending on the culture you came from, your interpretation could be different. Because the same body language.
Culture would be a factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're from New York, if you're from New York, Boston, or Chicago, or LA. Right, you'd have
exactly. Yeah. When I say culture, it's not just about country to country, right? It could be New York, and even within New York, Long Island and Staten Island, Brooklyn, they're all different.
Yeah, I know. I'm from Massachusetts, so I know all the New York.
Okay, right. Yeah. So, I actually do talk about cross-cultural communication, and what I always put an emphasis on is when you talk about culture or cultural difference, you really have to think about individuals. You can't label one person just because she or he looks like this, but try to understand and dig deeper into that particular person. What's their value? Why the why behind what she's saying or doing, right? So depending on, so it's like a culture of one individual. So everyone has a different culture. So with that said, there could be some variations of interpretations when a certain body language is used in many different ways. But as a speaker, you want to be clear with your body language. You want to move with a purpose. If you're using your hands, you don't want to use your hands just because it's your habit. You want to use your hand because you want to make a point, something like that. So I always advise all the speakers to move with a purpose.
Okay.
Thank you, Ed. Any other questions?
If you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Natsuyo, please do.
Thank you, Wendy, for your comment.
Natsuyo, I really think, well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this great presentation.
Thank you.
Most of me as an engineer, most of the time, the presentation is all about facts. So now I'm understanding there's a triad of the points to make. I always focus on the logos only.
Right.
Because I'm a logical person, I'm trying to explain things. You seldom do not understand that I have to connect with the others in terms of emotions. And then you think that as an engineer, you think that your machine is gonna get the trust conveyed to them. But what you're saying is it's really the person that has to convey the trust. So right. I think it was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Fred. Yeah, when I was a consultant, I mean, I'm still a consultant, but when I was starting out as a consultant, I was using all logic because it makes sense on the paper, and then logically this is a strategy. But people don't buy into it, and I find that people with more technical background, like yourself, Fred, tend to use a lot of facts and data and logic, but the logic alone isn't going to move people. It's a story. So even if the story portion is really tiny in your technical presentation, you need to have some kind of emotional connection.
I'm a copywriter, and one of the things you learn in advertising is that you have to touch the emotion to make someone make a buying decision, because the part of the brain that actually makes a decision is the emotional part of the brain. So right. That's why you always want to have a connection to, and your stories did that. They created a sense of drama about something that's pretty straightforward, but nevertheless, there was a story there.
Right, exactly. And that's how you are remembered as a speaker too. You can make the same point, but because you're adding your own personal perspectives, your own personal stories, your experience, your knowledge, that becomes your one and only story. And that's your uniqueness. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Paul. Good to see your face here.
Hello, Natsuyo.
Hey.
Yes, I unfortunately I didn't see the beginning, the before video. I assume you showed the before video, but I really liked the kind of the structure, the checkpoints of building up something that can engage the audience. So I love that in terms of, I think that 7-38-55 model, I think we could, maybe if one of those elements is negative, then it destroys it. Something like that, it will explode it, it will kind of negate all the other positives. So it's good that one has a kind of focuses in your presentation, you focused on mainly on the 7%, but which is important, because if you don't engage there, then the rest is also not useful.
Right, exactly. So I mean, everything is important. That's why it's called the triad. All three elements have to be there. So even if you have the right logic, right story, if you tell that story poorly with a wrong intention, that ruins the whole thing.
Yes, and Natsuyo, we have one question in the chat that I'll read, and this will probably be our last question for today. It is from Ken. Among the 6 C's, I think conflict could be a most important element. Do 6 C's have any priority in terms of persuasion process?
Okay, well, sorry I missed this question. Well, thank you, Ken, for asking this question. Yes, conflict is definitely the most important piece of 6 C's. In terms of priorities, let me say, in terms of orders of introducing the C's, there is no, you don't have to follow exactly in that order. As long as you have all 6 elements in reasonable order, that'll be a good story. In terms of priority, I would say really highlight on the conflict, but you can build up the story by just like layer by layer, master the pieces, right? You have the character all painted really vividly, and then the circumstances is painted clearly, and then it builds up one by one. So if I have to choose one of the C's as a priority, I would say conflict, and that's often that's the C's. That's one of the C's that's often forgotten, especially in business presentations, because we don't want to talk about conflicts. But because you want to put, because you present the conflict of your company or yourself or your clients or potential clients out there, your story becomes really convincing and relatable. So conflict.
Wow, well, thank you so much. This was really, really interesting. I think that a lot of great points were made. I think everybody who attended will have a lot to think about in their next presentation. And everybody, this will be on the PTG YouTube channel. So if you want to review anything or if you want to share it with any friends or coworkers, please be sure to pay attention. We'll be announcing it at some point. And I do want to say that we do this, the Pacific Tango group does this every month. And next month, if you are interested, on June 9th, it will actually be me, yours truly. I will be presenting to HR managers who work at Japanese companies. And these are for the people who try to hire, search for, interview and hire bilingual candidates. So I have experience with Japanese and English, and I will be sharing that on behalf of my company, Ikigai Connections. So if you know of anybody who may be interested in that, please do let them know that it's up and coming. And if you have any questions with regards to the PTG, the Pacific Tango group, or to Natsuyo, please be sure to reach out. The information, just go to pacifictangogroup.com and like us on all your social media, and we'll just be sharing a lot of information about upcoming events. So we hope that you enjoyed today. Thank you again to Natsuyo for a very inspiring presentation. And I know personally, I will be using these tips to make my next month's presentation better. So I look forward to that too. Thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you again. Bye.